So as I begin this talk, I'm just really aware that in many respects we are a very unique generation, because it's like there's an earthquake that's happening and we're being asked to stand as the earthquake is going on, because we are going through such transformation and radical change in terms of religion and spirituality. So give yourselves credit. This is a big work. This is not easy. And yet, you are the ones who have chosen to be here at this time. And the title for my talk today is No Labor Day. Because we have been given this paradigm of laboring spiritually. And it's an illusion. It's already done. We're just remembering. That's how easy it is. So if you come away with anything this morning, come away with that. This is not a labor. And the origin of our religious beliefs are steeped in a story that say, we did something terribly wrong that caused God to be angry with us. That we are flawed beings who deserve to be punished. And hence, religion is about pulling ourselves up with our bootstraps, not a labor of love, but a job of appeasement and winning back the favor of this angry God and to avoid damnation. So what feeling comes up when you think about that story? Fear. Am I appeasing that God enough? Have I won back the favor yet? Resentment, I think, is a feeling that would be understandable for us to have. Always to be under the yoke of that burden of trying to win back Daddy's favor. Thankfully, spirituality offers us a very different understanding of things, a different option. And that's what unity, fortunately, has given us. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all worship one God, the God of Abraham. And at their most mature level, there is much wisdom that each of these traditions brings and contributes towards the healing of ourselves, our understanding of ourselves, our relationship with God, and therefore the world. And so today we explore ways in which the spirituality, the highest spirituality of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam reflects the image of God more accurately, the true God, and supports humanity's transformation then into the likeness of that God. How do we do that? So let me begin with one of my favorite philosophers, a passage from Ken Wilber. And he says, religion itself has always performed two very important but very different functions. One, it acts as a way of creating meaning for the separate ego self. It offers myths and stories and tales and narratives, scriptures, rituals that, taken together, help the separate self make sense of and endure the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. This function of religion does not usually or necessarily change the level of consciousness of a person. It does not deliver radical transformation, nor does it deliver a shattering liberation from the separate self itself. Rather, it consoles the self, it strengthens the self, it defends the self, and it promotes the self. And as long as the separate self believes the myths, performs the rituals, mouths the prayers, embraces the dogma, then the self, it is fervently believed, will be saved, either now in the glory of being God-saved or goddess-favored, or in the future in an afterlife that guarantees reward and eternal life view offers a protective shield as you go through life. And the aim of such teachings is not transformation, not a new understanding of self or a new identity, but rather to improve or maintain the status quo of one's life. So again, what's the feeling that's behind all that? Again, it's fear. How can I protect myself? How can I be safe? How can I be saved? It's a very contracting energy, isn't it? Wilbur continues, however, there is a second function religion has also served in a usually very, very small minority of people, the function of radical transformation and liberation now. This use of religion does not fortify the separate self, but actually shatters it, does not provide consolation, but devastation, not entrenchment, but emptiness, not comfort, but revolution, in short. Not a conventional bolstering of consciousness, but a radical transmutation and transformation at the deepest seat of consciousness itself. It offers us a new grand understanding of who we really are, which requires giving up an old, lesser understanding of who we thought we were. He says the second function is the ultimate goal of all mature spirituality, as opposed to religion. This is the contemplative, the mystical dimension of religion. And as Father Thomas Keating says, the primary purpose of spirituality is to help us move beyond the separate self-sense to union with God. And what is the feeling that underlies that? One of relief. I'm not climbing that mountain. Hope. Wow, this really feels different. So which of the two do you identify with? And I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up. You can be honest. We've all grown up with traditional religion. It's embedded in us. We've plunged into unity in the New Thought movement. So what's going on inside? Is there still some stuff in there that's resonating with that more traditional religion as opposed to the revolutionary spirituality that we are engaged in? Today we focus on that transformational ability of the Abrahamic religions, where God is our essential nature. God and I are one. The Father and I are one. And the goal is to be transformed into God's likeness, rather than what I would call the transactional approach to religion, where our ego or our false self is central and we are trying to control God. And transactional religion is based on, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. God, I will do this for you, but you need to guarantee this for me. It's transactional, and it implies two different beings. And it's a contract based on mutual usage. I'm really using you, and you're really using me. I'm sure you can think of incidents in your own life when you were at that stage of development. I remember a lady telling me that she was a young girl and her grandmother was dying. And so she prayed to God that her grandmother would live. And her grandmother died. And she was done with God. A more serious example of that was when I was a priest in Pearl City. There was a couple who used to come every Saturday to the 5:30 Mass faithfully. And then after the Mass one Saturday, they were driving into town, into Honolulu, and traffic came to a stop, and there was an accident, and he was either a firefighter or a policeman, retired. So he got out to kind of help, whatever, and he approached the vehicle. I guess traffic had backed up and the car had braked, and he tried to avoid hitting the car, and he went up the embankment and flipped. And as the man approached the car, he realized it was his son. And his son broke his neck. 22 years of age, he was a All-American baseball player, All-American football player. He was an incredible Hawaiian hula dancer, singer, guitar player. He was just one of these like incredible guys. And he'd been killed. And I sat with them discussing the memorial, and she said to me, I've come to Mass every Saturday of my adult life. After this funeral, I am never darkening the door of this church again. That's contractual religion. I'll do this, you protect me, you protect mine. We've all started out there as kids with that understanding of God, and then we understand later that that isn't how it works. So the beginning of the real shift in understanding away from this contractual, transactional relationship with God really starts with Moses. God reveals the essence of divinity, of God's self, to Moses. He says, in the Hebrew language, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, which is most often translated as, I am that I am. I am what I am. It's said that a more accurate translation would be, I will be whatever I will be. In either case, the Hasidic understanding of the text is the same. God is all that is. God is all that's happening at every moment. God is I am. Not a being or even a supreme being, but being itself. Rabbi Rami Shapiro says, each of us is a placeholder of the I am. Just as a wave is a keeper of the ocean in its particular place and time, so are you a keeper of God in your particular place and time. To realize this about yourself is to realize it about everybody else. And central to staying on track with this understanding of God, that every moment is simply God expressing itself in form, as me, as you, as everything. Central to staying with that understanding and staying away from the transactional relationship with God is the role that the prophets played in the Old Testament. Isaiah, Jeremiah, my namesake, Ezekiel, others. These, if you were the canaries in the mine who squawked when the people got off track and started getting back to this transactional understanding of God. And the biblical tradition reveals that whenever the prophetic gift is lacking in a group or a religion or a culture, such a group will very soon become self-serving, self-perpetuating, and self-promoting. Without prophetic criticism, all sense of mission and message is lost. So institutions, governments, cultures of any kind usually move toward their own self-preservation and self-perpetuation, rather than, what are we doing for the world? In fact, the question of mission is not even asked very often, because self-preservation has become the end in itself, and the only mission. And that, my friends, is the death knell of any spiritual community, or any culture, or any government, when its existence is for its own self-preservation and nothing else. Then there's no mission to the outside world. There's no flow of energy. There's no service. And it's a collective issue, but it's also an individual issue for each of us. When our self-preservation overrides serving the world or our community. So it's very important that we keep our mission before our eyes periodically. And Labor Day, I think, is the perfect time to assess how we're doing with that. So we have a PowerPoint. This is the Unity Worldwide Ministries mission statement. It says, building a world that works for all. So here we are as Unity locally, and this is the overriding mission that we are saying we believe in. We want to build a world that works for everybody, not just ourselves, not just white people, not just whatever. We want to build a world that works for all, because that's the only thing that works. And then the second mission statement is our mission statement here at Unity in the Gold Country. It is to awaken in love, in unity with all. Because how we make that world work for everyone is to realize our oneness and to share love. That's how we're going to build that world that works for all. So is that what you want? Is that what you're living for? Is that your purpose? And is it a burden or is it a joy? I believe that the Jewish religion is archetypal religion because it illustrates the pattern of growth, spiritual growth, of maturity, of immaturity, of advancement, regression, of the best and the worst, that characterizes all cultures and all religions. And it's embedded there in their stories and in their scriptures for us to read. And Christianity has made the exact same mistakes. But we're normally not able to see that because we're so close we can't see the wood from the trees. Once we recognize Judaism as archetypal religion, that the patterns of ego and transformation and regression are universal, but told in their story, we're able to see it a little better. Because it's like, oh, well, it's back there. It's their story. But the prophets are telling us, no, it's your story too. And we can learn from them. And so the prophet steps in to disrupt the usual social consensus. When culture says, oh, we're the greatest, we're the best group, we've got our act together, the prophets respond, hold on a sec. You think you're the greatest, that your society is the greatest? And that's why prophets die young. That's why spiritual leaders sometimes get kicked out of their communities. Because they're telling the truth. They're exposing the shadow that the community doesn't want to see. Prophets expose and topple the group's idols and the blind spots, showing that we make things into absolutes that shouldn't be absolutes, and that we relativize what in fact is central and important. So the tendency in religion to absolutize things comes from a deep psychological need for us to feel like, well, we're right, we're on really solid ground here, we've got the truth, and I understand that, that's natural. But the prophets say there's only one absolute, and that's God, and it's that you are one with God. Don't make the finger pointing to the moon into the moon itself, as it were. And Jeremiah the prophet says, the temple of Yahweh, don't you see? It has become a robber's den. Brave man. But of course, he's talking about Jerusalem. He wasn't talking about Grass Valley. He wasn't talking about unity in the Gold Country. He wasn't referring to me, was he? Archetypal means it refers to me, it refers to everyone. And so we have to have that healthy looking at ourselves, a prophetic voice within ourselves that asks those questions. Are we self-serving? Are we self-preservation? Is that what we're all about? Or do we have a mission? Do we have a purpose bigger than ourselves? And so the spiritual journey moves us from recognizing that our group is God's chosen people, even in our imperfection, to knowing that all people, in fact all of creation, is God's beloved, made in the image of God, and that all are equally imperfect in that reflection. So don't waste your time calculating the degrees of imperfection. I can certainly say as a Catholic, God, every week was about reflecting on how imperfect I had been that week. And if it was bad enough, then I had to go to confession and have it erased. What a waste of time and energy. It's a black hole. It just gets deeper and deeper. And yet imperfection is the pattern that draws forth the divine mercy. I don't know if you remember Sebastian, who was here on Mother's Day. He gave this beautiful talk. And he spoke to the Course of Love group. And he said that Jesus once said to him, "It's your specific imperfection that makes you special and recognizable to me." Here we are, we're hiding out from our imperfection. And he's saying, no, it's the flaw in the diamond that's sparkling, that's drawing my attention to you. That makes you so wonderful and unique and so lovable. This is what makes us endearing to the divine. This is what makes us unique. And this is how we stand out in a world of 7 billion people. Our imperfection, that is so unique to us. And it's not about erasing our sense of self, but appreciating it as a vessel for the divine, even in its flawedness, especially its flawedness that makes the divine more visible in us. And so the history of religion has often been a desperate, laborious attempt to run from our humanity, our frailty, our flaws, our imperfections, and to seek desperately to fit ourselves into one image of holiness and perfect behavior. And all the while we have been laboring in vain, because at heart we all know that we're still the same as we started out all those years ago. Yes, we're more sophisticated and we know how to present ourselves a little better, and we're more adept at covering up all those cracks. But we often fail to see and appreciate ourselves the way that the divine does. We're not seeing what is endearing about us to the divine. Because you see, God's relationship with us is not a contract, a quid pro quo. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. It is what the Jewish and Christian scriptures call a covenant agreement. And at the heart of that agreement is that God is and will always be with us and in love with us, because we are another self to and for God. How can God not love itself? That's the covenant. It's a covenant with God's self. It's one being. It's not two beings in a contract. It's one being. It's a covenant to oneself. And so it isn't a labor for God. It's a joy and a delight to love us in our imperfection. And the reaction to that revelation that is asked of us is to be loving in response, to love ourselves, to love our neighbors, and thus love God. To love all of created imperfection, our imperfection. And even if we don't, we will still be loved and not rejected. That's part of the covenant. And this is a prophetic message, and we are asked to find our prophetic voice in our time to announce it to the world as our mission, and to be in service to all people. To build that world that works for all, and to awaken in love in unity with all. Is that appealing?
Yes.
Are you with me?
Yes.
It's your choice. I'm only watering the garden. I'm only remembering what we all know. I'm only asking you to decide whether you want to blossom and bloom, or whether you want to be a shrinking violet by the wall. Let your light shine. Let your love shine. Fulfill the mission. Let us take these words into a time of silence. And of course, in that silence, we're simply connecting with our essence, with the very presence of the divine in, as, and through us.